Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another coffee chat. So I'm going to drink my morning coffee before I get my squatting started this morning, because I squat first thing every morning. Um, Today, I kind of want to do something I've been doing a little bit of in the past, of helping promote some of these smaller YouTube channels that actually have good information, because most of the popular YouTubers literally know nothing about training. They literally only know how to take drugs. That's all they know how to do. They know nothing about sports sciences, strength and conditioning. They don't even know the best ways to stimulate growth once 2 grams of test are taken out of the equation. So today I want to talk with you guys a bit about Alec and Enkiri, someone I shouted out recently. I've been watching a lot of his material, keeping up with what he's doing, and he's actually got some fantastic stuff up there, even though it's a small channel. Guy's brutally strong. He is peeled. He's a smaller guy, but again, when you start talking about Wilks scores and powerlifting, he's fantastic. But not just about powerlifting. The guy's all around athletic. He does all sorts of cleans, power cleans, hang cleans, full cleans. He does weighted carries, box jumps. He does all that other stuff. He is legitimately into his own strength and conditioning, even though he's a coach also. So these are the guys that people need to be looking at. Him, the Swole Fester, people like that. But Alec made a whole video the other day, and I haven't got around to mentioning it. I've needed a few days. But I went ahead and watched it, where he talked about a replacement for the rack pull for all these people who are trying to do rack pulls to get their traps big, to get yoked, whatever it is people want to call it. And that's actually becoming a big thing, and a lot of people think that's all alpha dest. Other people have been doing that for a few years, and he jumped on that trend, and that's what he decided to do. But people need to understand rack pull is definitely not the best exercise for this, what I've told you guys a lot of. Now, Alec broke that down, and I'll link his video down below so you guys can check that out. But what he ended up recommending in place of it is an exercise that is technically safer, easier on equipment, that doesn't require as much weight, because, again, you're dealing with explosiveness for muscle fiber recruitment, and it's going to give you a more developed shoulder girdle. And that was the Snatch Grip High Pull. Snatch Grip High Pull. Now, it's interesting because that's what you see all these guys with a strength and conditioning background who are telling you if your shoulder girdle is lagging. Are you guys noticing a trend there? Bugenhagen, Alec and Enkiri, all these guys are telling you the same thing. They're telling you, no, rack pulls are not what you need. These are people with strength and conditioning backgrounds. These are people who actually work with real athletes for a living, because Bugenhagen's also a coach. These are people who work with real athletes who are athletes themselves, who are saying, no, these rack pulls aren't going to work. It's only a bunch of silly bros and people who really and truly think that that's the best way to build traps. It really isn't. And we get back to that point of, if other stuff in your shoulders are lagging, why would you want to focus on the traps? Meaning, shouldn't you grow everything together? If you want the most balance for either a certain look, you want the most balance for athletics and injury prevention, you really need to be building your entire shoulder girdle together with your traps. So ideally, you want exercises that work more than just the traps. And again, all these high pulls cover it if done correctly. Now, high pulls can be dangerous, but there are ways to work around that. And I think he gives a good example of how to do it with a snatch grip to get the desired result. Gives a real good example of how to do it. So again, this is multiple people telling everyone the same thing. Telling people the exact same thing, and people don't want to listen. And the truth is, it's like he said in this actual video, it is impossible to stimulate maximum trap growth with a short range of motion rack pull. Not just difficult, not just, oh, it's just one other exercise that can do it. It actually can't do it. The laws of physics and biomechanics actually prevent it. In fact, I go so far as to say, I'd say, and I think he more or less expressed that also, that you can't even stimulate more growth in that area than you can with a normal conventional deadlift. It's pretty unlikely. All you're doing is removing some of the posterior chain and removing the hamstrings. And the way people perform these short range of motion rack pulls, they're not even doing a hip hinge. And that's what people need to realize. If you're going to do this as a total back exercise, that hip hinge is important. Is anyone actually hip hinging these 5-inch and 8-inch range of motion rack pulls? No, they squat them up. So their hips and their quads are doing all the work, right? Because they're not bending over and doing a hip hinge. They're not doing a partial deadlift. They're squatting the weight up off the pins. There is no movement really of the back happening for these people, and there's just a stretch on the traps. Well, the problem is that the traps get really stretched on a heavy deadlift also. Just because you add more weight and it hurts more doesn't mean the traps are taking more of the load. The traps are already stretched. And if the traps are stretched under a load, do you really think 500 pounds versus 800 pounds is going to stretch them further? No, it's just all your ligaments taking it. And as he pointed out, there's less work involved in general. That's why you can lift so much more weight, because you're moving through a shorter range of motion, dramatically shorter. It's easier. So of course you can move a heavier weight through a shorter range of motion. Then you've got different lever arms there. So in other words, none of the muscles in the back are actually working any harder than you are on a deadlift. They're not working any harder because they're also maximally contracted on a deadlift. All right, if you pull the most weight you can pull off the floor, or you do a 5-rep set to failure, you have completely fatigued the ability of all of those muscle fibers to contract through that range of motion. You've fatigued them all. They're done. Just because you shorten the range of motion with a heavier weight, you're doing oftentimes, in some cases, less work or the same amount of work. You can't stimulate the muscle fibers further by doing that. It doesn't actually work. A muscle fiber can only be fatigued so much. It can only fire so much. And just because, the fact that you can move more weight should tell you that it's easier. And you're still going to do the same amount of work in those muscles. But again, we come back to the point there's not even a hip hinge, so it's not a good exercise for the back. It's just a short range partial for the quads and the hips, because these guys all squatted up. None of them are bent over and pulling. They're squatting when they do these. And it's no different than doing a 5-inch range of motion squat, right? It's no different than doing a 5-inch range of motion squat off pins. The other thing that he points out, though, besides destruction of the equipment, is destruction of your body. Because let's say you are a 500-pound deadlifter and you put 800 or 900 pounds on one of these rack pulls and lift it. If the muscles aren't working any harder, what is taking the load? Your ligaments, your bones, and it is a risk of injury. And again, that's a strength and conditioning coach, a legit coach telling you all you are doing is adding risk of injury with no additional trap stimulation. And again, we come back to that point, since it's not even a real exercise for the traps, there is no movement of the traps happening. It's isometric, and isometrics have never been found to produce as much muscle growth in humans as full range of motion. They can produce some growth. They can't compete with full range of motion or an effective range of motion. So the exercises that build traps the best tend to be ones that use the whole shoulder girdle. Rows actually build your traps. Heavy rows build your traps. Overhead pressing builds your traps. And look at even the EMG data on some of that stuff. Those things build your traps, but if they're really a lagging area and you really feel that area is not coming up, your muscles tend to grow better when they are used as a unit. And you take things like high pulls or power cleans, power snatches, all these things, they work the entire shoulder girdle. They work the entire shoulder girdle. And they do so explosively. And what do we know based upon the data out there? That the more explosively you lift, the more muscle fibers are recruited even with the same weight in a muscle. In fact, we've got data showing that sometimes weights as light as 50 or 60%, if you move them explosively enough, they approach the sort of muscle fiber recruitment that you get from training a max or of going to failure. It can produce a similar response because, again, in order to accelerate a weight, move it explosively, you get more recruitment. Look at the other studies we've got on lifting explosively versus mind-muscle connection. It beat mind-muscle connection on every muscle in the lift. When you take a compound movement and you lift it as fast as you can with good form and you focus on explosiveness, even the data shows that it lights up every muscle more than if you actually use mind muscle connection and focus on squeezing that individual muscle. And when you combine the different muscles together and you squeeze this one on this set, this one on this set, the explosive lift beats all of them put together. So again, you've got a nice explosive exercise that's easy to recover from. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's a hell of a lot safer, even though it carries a risk of injury. Again, potential shoulder impingement if you're not careful, but the risk of injury is lower than a rack pull. Rack pulls do nothing but let you show off at the gym. They destroy bars, they destroy pins, and they overstress ligaments, tendons, bones, things like that, to the point to where it will interfere with your other training. And if you guys don't believe that they don't work, you've got these other coaches saying this is not the best way to do it, right? People are still out there doing it because they're a bunch of dumbass bros who don't know any better. Or it's being sold to them by people who should know better, but they're marketing to kids. But go look online since this trend has started. Start looking at rack pulls and look at some of the people who are doing them. There are tiny, scrawny kids who are rack pulling very heavy weights. I'm talking 600 to 800 pounds for their work sets on these rack pulls, and they don't even look like they lift. Or in some cases, the ones who are doing 800-pound rack pulls look like they are halfway through their noob gains. They look like they're halfway through their noob gains, like they've put on about 10 pounds of muscle since they walked in the gym. And none of them have massive shoulder girdles. What does that tell you? That maybe people who are building this look using this exercise, maybe they're doing something else to facilitate more growth that is not actually the rack pulls doing it. You might want to go look at how strong some of these people are on other exercises that actually work the traps more, or consider maybe they're putting substances into their body that make traps grow easier. There's a lot going on here. Again, just because you see someone do something, and even if they legitimately believe it's responsible, doesn't make it fact when biomechanics says otherwise. So yeah, that's why I like guys like Alec, because he's out here putting out real information that's legitimately helping people. He's a good coach, and I would consider him an expert. So yeah, go check out his video. If you guys don't believe me, then listen to him. So I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.